The DJI Osmo Pocket 3, Pocket 3 for short from now on, has been massively hyped since its release about 6 months ago. I've been using it for almost that amount of time. So this is a long-term review, which I think is more useful for people as it gives me a lot more experience with it, more varied footage, and a chance for things to have been improved by firmware. This often happens with DJI products, as was certainly the case with the Pocket 3. The Pocket 3 is incredibly impressive in so many ways, although there are a few things that hold it back. Despite those things, I think it's my favourite new camera the last 2 years. Not my best, but favourite.
Malfoy, come here!
Whilst this is primarily a review of the Pocket 3, I am featuring both the DJI Mic 2 and the impressive Osmo Action 4, which I got just before my October holiday to Skiathos in Greece. Throughout you'll see the story of Archie, who I first met during this holiday. I was initially going to make this a much more significant part of this video, but as there's so much to cover with the Pocket 3, to avoid making it stupidly long, I'm making a separate film for my One Man Five Cats channel so I can cover his story properly. The original Osmo was released in late 2015. It was the X3, a 3-axis gimbal camera on a handle almost identical to one on the DJI Inspire 1 drone. Recording in 4K up to 30p with a fixed focus 20mm equivalent lens on a 1/2.3 inch sensor. In mid-2016, DJI released an adapter to allow you to attach the X5 and the Cinema D&G RAW recording X5R. These are micro four thirds cameras made for the Inspire 1. Whilst the image was nicer with both of these cameras than the X3, using them wasn't a great experience, primarily because of the need for focus control. The autofocus, terrible. Manual focusing, awful. Around this time, single-armed 3-axis gimbals started appearing everywhere, although it was about 2 years before DJI released their Ronin S. Using your own camera made much more sense for many people, including myself, especially as autofocus was starting to get pretty good on my Sony mirrorless cameras around then. Then in late 2018, DJI released the tiny and appropriately named Osmo Pocket. Packing the same size 1/2.3 inch sensor as the X3, but with a tighter 26mm equivalent lens, 4K up to 60p, and 120 frames per second in 1080p. It also had autofocus that worked pretty well. Initially only contrast, but they enabled phase detect later on with firmware. The image from the Pocket was a step up from the X3, despite being a fraction of the size. However, the image was really too over-sharpened, and it was not possible to bring it down in camera, a common issue with DJI's cameras. So I used film convert nitrate to soften it down, and it made the image much more pleasant. I used it quite a lot around that time, as I loved having a tiny gimbal camera that could literally go in my pocket. Take note, Blackmagic. 2 years later, the Pocket 2 came out, physically very similar, but with some key improvements. A 1/1.7 inch sensor, which is almost twice the size. The lens was back to a 20mm equivalent. There was also a much needed battery handle and DJI's first wireless mic to use directly with it. It was also now capable of recording up to 240 frames per second in 1080p. The image from it was an improvement, but it wasn't a huge step up. I didn't think there'd be a Pocket 3 as electronic stabilization and action cameras become so good. The original Osmo Action came out about 6 months after the Pocket. I compared them to many other stabilized cameras in my ridiculous video called Not Just Another Action Camera Comparison. So when they announced this, the Pocket 3 in October 2023, I was surprised and not initially super interested. That was until I read the specs, and especially the fact it has a stacked 1-inch sensor, which is the same size sensor as you get inside the Sony ZV-E1 and the RX100, etc, etc. So a decent size sensor, and something which should make a substantial difference to the quality of the image in this camera, and it did. The first thing that jumps out at you is the new screen. It rotates from its vertical rest position to horizontal. This can be set to switch it between shooting landscape or portrait video. It's still small, at 2 inches, but as the previous Pocket screens are just 1 inch, you can at least use it without a phone. Mostly. The Pocket 3 can shoot up to 4K 120 frames per second in 10-bit in all 3 picture profiles, normal, HLG, and most importantly, D-Log-M. Initially, the 120 frames per second was only in the normal profile, but a firmware update thankfully fixed that. The normal profile is a baked-in Rec 709 look that limits the dynamic range and makes it harder to grade. It's really just for when you want an image straight out of the camera that you don't want to touch. D-Log-M is what I will always choose to shoot with, if I can. The 4K 100 and 120 frames per second in slow motion mode look really great. It definitely helps that they've made it work in D-Log-M and HLG now, rather than just a normal profile. Like the Pocket 2, you can also shoot Full HD in 240 frames per second, but this is locked to the normal profile. Looks quite bad. There's clearly a lot of line skipping going on to get to this frame rate. This is something I have with my Sony Alphas too. Great at 4K 120 frames per second, but not at the 1080p 240. But like the Sony footage, if I run the Pocket 3's footage through Topaz Video AI, it makes it look so much better. Not just upscaling it to 4K, but enhancing it. I talk about this software in almost every video. I did some more control tests in my Casio, just something static, between the various frame rates and resolutions of the Pocket 3 and the Pocket 2. You will find the Pocket 2 look sharper in some cases, but that's because of the in-camera sharpening that you can't turn off. With the Pocket 3, there's no cropping of the image in any mode. The 4K does indeed look the same all the way through to 120 frames per second, and definitely better in D-Log-M or HLG. The 1080p also looks pretty great up to 60p. Again, stick to D-Log-M or HLG for the best dynamic range. The quality drop when you go to 1080p 120 frames per second or 240 frames per second is huge. But at least in 120 you can shoot in all the 3 profiles, unlike the 240. I doubt I'll be using this mode much unless I really need to. Topaz can actually do a pretty good frame interpolation to create higher frame rates, so from like the 4K 120. It takes a while to process, and to get the best results, use a higher shutter speed and as low an ISO as possible. The Pocket 2 looks great all the way to 60p. Use decent alike for the best dynamic range, but just like the Pocket 3, the 120 and 240 take a big hit in resolution. There's also a bit of a crop. The one saving grace is you can shoot in decent alike in both of these frame rates. This makes them look better than the Pocket 3 versions, which is pretty disappointing and unexpected. What's absolutely key to getting the most natural looking image is setting your sharpness and noise reduction for every mode that lets you to -2 for sharpness and -2 for noise reduction. If you need more sharpness and if you need noise reduction, do it in post for superior results. The only time I'd ever use in-camera noise reduction, I actually have it on right now at +1, is if I was going to be uploading it straight to social media by passing a computer. And it is visible across all your ISOs, but definitely much more visible in the higher ones. And I will be demonstrating that in the low light section later on in this video. These settings were first introduced in the Mini 4 Pro and were key in making the image such a huge step up from the Mini 3 Pro. Likewise with the Action 4, which also has this. The Action 3 does not. I'm not going too in depth on the Action 4 as there's so much to take in with the Pocket 3, but there are some important things to mention. Physically it looks almost identical to the 3, but it has some very important differences. A 1.6 times larger 1/1.3 inch sensor compared to that 1/1.7 inch of the 3. 10-bit D-Log-M, plus also sharpness and noise reduction settings. Put it down over here. downside to having a larger sensor in an action camera like we have here in the Action 4, it's 1/1.3 inch sensor, is the minimum focus. It is fixed focus and it is 40 centimeters minimum. So I think it's about here. So I think it's in focus. It is hard to tell because there is no separation. And when you are closer than your minimum focus, it is much more obvious that you're out of focus than with a smaller sensor inside these. So that's why we don't often see 1-inch action cameras, because of that problem with the minimum focus. Come on, high five me. High five. This is where one of the big advantages of the Pocket 3 comes in. Autofocus. With a minimum focus of 20 centimeters, you can get a fair amount of bokeh, but you still get noticeable separation even at further distances from your subject. It's an f2 aperture, but remember this f2 for 1-inch, so don't expect the same sort of results as an f2 on a larger sensor camera. Getting this with an action camera is impossible unless you have a diopter. I showed this in my recent video about the excellent Insta360 Pro, which has the same size sensor as the Action 4. Switching out diopters is a faff though. Having a camera with a lens that can change focus and has natural separation is so much easier and looks way better. The autofocus is pretty quick, isn't it? The problem is it's a bit wild and it can easily shift onto the wrong thing, and not subtly either. The problem with the little screen is it's tough to tell if you've lost focus. I don't know how much of the sensor has autofocus points, but it will generally focus on the most prominent thing in the center of the frame. I think it's roughly this sort of area being tracked, so if your subject leaves it briefly, then focus is lost. It also will frequently jump to the background if it's brighter than your subject, or there aren't any good edges to grab onto. In low light it also struggles, but I will go into this more in that section. If you use the Active Track Auto Phase Detect mode, then it will keep you in focus no matter where you go, because it moves the gimbal to keep you centre of the frame. It doesn't look very natural though, and every slight movement will look like that. I just want the focus to stay on me. But I am exaggerating here because I haven't been moving this crazily, apart from just at this point. But there is definitely a use for the Active Track, and that's when it's on a wider shot and you're walking around. So I can select me here and it will start tracking me center framing, which is obviously not very natural to roll a thirds please, but you can use the joystick on the app, where is it, it's here somewhere, and then adjust your framing. But when you're moving it's not very natural. So if I want to be sort of more left of frame here, it will maintain that. You tilt down a bit more, that's as much as it can do. But I can see it in some situations being useful, but it's just not natural enough for movement. It's like you've got a sleepy camera operator who's always playing catch up for when you're filming, and you're probably not going to hire them again. So it needs smoothing out, it needs some curves please. I know it can't look into the future to know which way you're moving, but I would still rather it was playing catch up but smoothly playing catch up, rather than this sort of like fast unnatural thing. With the focus mode directly lifted from Sony cameras, product showcase mode, and it goes onto something you hold up in front of the camera because you're showing a product, and then we'll go back onto you and take it down. How this is different to the normal autofocus, I'm not quite sure. Let's find out. So this is the normal autofocus mode as I hold it up, and it still shifts to it. There is also a single point autofocus where you touch a screen to tell it where you want to be in focus, but it doesn't continue to track in that position. Focus stays locked there. It's the closest there is to manual focus. Here are some suggestions for DJI to put into future firmware to make the autofocus more reliable. Some will be easier than others to do. Face tracking should be possible because it can detect a face when it's using the Active Track mode. But what it needs is, of course, not to actually move the gimbal, but when it loses a face, for the autofocus to just disengage and then re-engage if they come back in. So, like this, it should stay at one fixed point, and then when I come back in, it should still be at that position, rather than moving onto the background and then back in again. This is an exaggerated version, but yeah, it's something that I would like to see if possible. If you press the screen that it's a single focus, it doesn't continue to track. To show you what I mean, if I'm going to touch his hand, we'll get the focus on it any second now. Now if I pull back, then we're out of focus. So it's not tracking in this position. What would be great is if you could hold down the focus point and get a lock, but no. But interestingly, if we do it on the Mimo app, we get the lock. As you can see, it works. But it's not a true continuous autofocus lock, because if I move off of it, then it will go onto the background. But what it does work as is an exposure lock, which is great to have. It's just a shame I can't actually engage it on the camera itself, and I have to use the Mimo app. You can certainly disengage it because there's a little icon on there. And you click that and it turns it off. And I think this will be the easiest way for them to implement this ability to have a tracking point for continuous autofocus, so it doesn't go off into the background. The 5D joystick has numerous functions for up, down, left, right, and for pressing in. Holding it in locks the gimbal, pressing it twice recenters the gimbal, 3 times makes it appear behind you. I mean, switches between pushing forwards and backwards. Pressing it once goes back to the main screen if you're in any of the menus. So while shooting, it could be used to turn continuous autofocus on or off. Manual focus could also be a possibility using the up and down of the joystick. It can currently be switched between digital zoom or tilting up and down, but nailing manual focus on this little screen is going to be incredibly challenging. Part of what makes Pocket 3 so good is it can literally go in your pocket and you can use the screen. It is just about big enough. I mean, for people like me, it's a bit more of a strain. It doesn't mean you have to just use that screen, because you can use your phone. This is Tilter's accessory mounting adapter. It's a great option here. Loads of 1/4-20 screw-on threads on either side, as well as NATO rails. You can easily attach your phone. The original Osmo phone holder didn't consider how much bigger phones would get in the future, but it still works with my iPhone 15 Pro Max with its case on just. Here I'm using a NATO monitor clamp from SmallRig with Newer's excellent iPhone cage, which is probably the most pro and solid way to use them together. With the app, you don't just get a much bigger screen, but yeah, histogram and zebras. A viewing lock when you're shooting D-Log M, and a much easier way to change your mode and settings. Bizarrely, unless I've missed it, you can only change your sharpness or noise reduction settings directly on the camera. Also, the shooting presets that you can create aren't accessible from the app either. Hello. Hi. You're very beautiful, aren't you? This is the problem. You come here and you get attached. But I've never seen so many in one place before. I've just had so many kittens dumped here this season. So I'm here to get Archie. Hello. I'm trying to find him. Archie. Hello. Archie. Archie, there you are. You ready? Come on, son. Let's put you in here. Oh, Archie. Start your new life. Well done. Just start. When you're making these long videos, it requires a lot of footage. Obviously, for a camera view, you want to have as much footage of the camera as possible, but it's not always what's needed. And sometimes you just need some shots which you don't have. And that's where the sponsor of this video comes in, Storyblogs. I think a few dog shots are needed to balance this review out, to make it a bit more impartial, as I don't have many. Storyblogs to the rescue once again. I've been using them for about 4 years now, and they are a fantastic resource, not just for dog shots and stock footage, but much more. There's music, sound effects, animated backgrounds, LUTs, transitions, graphics, images, and so much more. And they're royalty free, and you get unlimited downloads. You can pay monthly or annually. And to get started with Storyblogs, head to this link, which is also in the description. The more people who sign up using it, the more chance there is that they will sponsor more of my videos, as they are such a natural fit for me. Right. Oh yeah. One feature the app gives you, which I'm not going to be using, is the beauty mode. It does some interesting things to you. Now, it doesn't record this in camera. To actually have this, you need to offload via the app, if you really must. But is this an improvement? Is this a look I should go for from now on? Let me know in the comments. The one main thing that I miss when shooting with this is simply I can't get any tight shots unless I'm really up close, because it is a 24mm. I love my telephotos, I love shooting on long lenses. This is not a camera for that look at all. This is a wide camera, and that's fine for what it is. That's why I feel like this is a camera to work alongside my other cameras rather than just this. There is an up to 2x digital zoom, but there's very little difference in quality between it and just doing it in post. If you want to go wider, the wide angle adapter will give you a 15mm equivalent. I don't use it as there is too much distortion, and really annoyingly you have to take it off when you turn the camera off as it goes into its rest position. This is the same with DJI's diffusion filter. The case houses the wide angle adapter and the black pro mist. They are held on magnetically, haven't fallen out so far. I said in my recent Sony ZV-E1 review that I think the Pocket 3 is the perfect vlogging camera with its mechanical stabilization and 20mm lens. Personally, I don't like to vlog, but I'm doing some for you now so you can see it. Just some needlessly walking shots of me talking. Like the stuff of me talking on camera, sat down in the Catio. I'm using K&F Concepts Variable ND with built-in 1/4 diffusion filter. And I think it's particularly important to try and get the motion blur as close as possible, so 25p, 1/50 of a second, when you're doing these walking and talkings, because the horizon is staying level, but you're bouncing up and down. Without the filter on, my shutter speed is about 2,000th of a second right now. It just doesn't look anywhere near as nice. It looks so much better when you have the right amount of motion blur, like now. I've got Freewell's excellent mega filter set, which has diffusion filters, NDs and polarizers. They can't quite stay on when the camera closes down, but there's so much choice there. One thing to always carry with you is a lens cloth, as it's far too easy to get fingerprints on all of the filters as they are so small and fiddly. I briefly mentioned vertical video. You can do it very easily with this camera, although not in low light mode or slow motion. Only normal video up to 60 frames per second. Because the gimbal camera cannot rotate like the DJI Mini 3 and Mini 4 Pro, your resolution is limited to 3K, the sensor's vertical pixels are 3072, and you need 3840 to get 4K. If you are shooting vertical or 1x1 square video, it's a very important reason why you should switch to those aspect ratios rather than cropping the 16:9. Both use parts of the top and bottom of the sensor, which you don't see when recording in landscape. So you not only get more resolution, wider field of view vertically. The sensor's dimensions are 3840 by 37.2, which is an aspect ratio of 5:4. If shooting for vertical video, I'd say the most logical mode to use is 1x1, as you get the 9:16 vertical resolution and field of view, but with more on the left and right for shifting in post. Makes the screen look smaller though. It's a shame that the Pocket 3 can't record in 4:3 like the Action 4 is right now, because then you can just crop to the aspect ratio you want in post and not lose anything. You don't have to make that decision. And if you are using it for, shorts or Instagram reels or something, but also for normal YouTube stuff, it's much better just to have one version of it rather than have to keep doing it, right? You can of course take photos and they look pretty great as long as you shoot RAW. Despite the sensor being approximately 5:4, you can only take 16:9 square or 9:16 photos. There's a 180° and 3:3 panorama mode, which look really nice, and also various time-lapse modes. You can set the Pocket 3 to create them in video or photos and video, which I did here. So I had instant playback of my time-lapse, but I also had the raw photos for more flexibility in post. Battery life is very good, but like the previous Pockets, the battery is not replaceable. Expect about 2 hours recording from the built-in 1300 mAh battery. You can also charge it via USB-C power delivery. It can charge to 80% in just 16 minutes with a 65-watt charger or battery. To get 100% takes 32 minutes. I definitely recommend getting the 950 mAh battery handle though. This can be bought on its own or with the Creator Combo. I've got it close to water many times, but I'm always careful. And when I want to get some underwater shots, I cheat. This isn't an action camera. It's nowhere near as robust as the Action 4, which can go down to 18 meters in water. Yeah, I'm not doing that. Audio is a huge part of why I love the Pocket 3. The internal mic sounds surprisingly good. I have a 3 mic array for capturing omnidirectional stereo sound. You can add an external mic via the USB-C, but the most important thing is how beautifully the new DJI Mic 2 works with it. You can connect up to 2 transmitters directly as the receiver is built into the Pocket 3. There's a mic capsule on the transmitter, like the original DJI Mic. So I'm not a fan of seeing microphones so obviously in shot, so I bought a couple of their lav mics, which are decent. You can actually thread the cable like this, which will make it very hard to accidentally pull the lav mic out. With the Creator Combo, you get 1 transmitter, but you can buy them separately or get the whole kit, which includes 2 transmitters, the receiver, and a charging case. The charging case is neat, but I wish they had left enough space for you to keep the wind muff on when putting them in. Don't use the DJI Mic 2's noise reduction mode as it's way too aggressive. Do it in post like you do with the noise from the image, and it's very easy to actually accidentally put on here, but I'm just going to turn it off. So no longer noise reduction. Sounds better, doesn't it? Always turn on the much welcome new 32-bit float internal recording as a safety backup, which can be set to record continuously, like a body recorder, or start and stop with the video recording. You can also trigger your recordings from the actual mic by pressing the link button. I'm not going to do it now because it stops recording, like this. By turning on the backup audio setting, you can record a backup WAV file of your internal mics to the micro SD card alongside your video, even if using the DJI Mic 2s, effectively giving you 4-channel audio. This is so useful to have, but annoyingly it doesn't work in low light mode, and in slow motion mode it only works if you are in the normal profile. In D-Log, M or HLG, you do at least still get audio recorded as a AAC file of your selected audio source alongside your MP4. This is something many much more expensive cameras don't do. The Pockets have been doing this since the first model. Having the internal mic backup audio track is particularly useful if you've got any issues with the DJI mic, some clothes rustling, or maybe you forgot to pair it up. The internal mics are still usable, they're very good. And also when you're just out and about filming, you want to get some quick stuff, you're not going to stop and put mics on people, you're going to go with what you got. This is my mum. Hello mum. I'm following you. Is that your natural hair colour, mum?
Yeah.
How come I'm not a redhead?
Well, it's your problem.
Oh. Mum, you look so little.
It's lovely, isn't it?
You look so little. Mini mum. She's 3'5".
Is it much further?
Yes. The main thing for me that's missing from the DJI Mic 2 is timecode support, something that the Rode Wireless Go has. Lollipops and nut job. You can jam sync the Pocket 3 and Action 4 with timecode from something like the Tentacle Sync or Deity TC1. But unlike the Rode Wireless Pro's receiver, the DJI Mic 2 cannot generate timecode, sadly. Archie's plane's delayed by 20 minutes. Flight itself only lasts 20 minutes. What you got there?
Look how perfect he is. He's just looking around, seeing what's happening.
You're free! Archie! Hello. You gonna come out? Funny little cat. Archie! Stay there, Archie. That's better, isn't it, Archie? Oh, sorry, that's all the litter I got. Thank God. This is your new home. You must be gagging to go. There's a dedicated low light mode, which I don't think you should use at all. I don't use. I'm going to show you why. I'm also going to show you the best settings to get the best low light results. You do need to be realistic though. This is a 1-inch sensor, but despite that, it's still pretty impressive what you can get from the camera. Archie! One clear thing is that autofocus suffers when shooting in either the dedicated low light mode or just high ISOs. This is a common problem with most cameras, but it's worse here than with my Sony's. The low light mode does what it says. It lets you see more in camera. But there's no magic to it. This is the only video mode in which you have no control over sharpness and noise reduction, as it uses both of these in combination with the ability to go higher with an ISO to get a brighter image. D-Log-M and HLG max out at 3200 ISO, normal pitch profile 6400 ISO, low light mode can go 1 1/3 stop higher at 16,000, but it's in the normal color profile. There's certain shots and situations I think it's usable, but you need to be realistic about what it can achieve. The combination of noise reduction and over sharpening can look quite ugly at times. The best way to show you the differences and how the noise reduction settings affect the image is by using my face. To get the correct exposure in camera, I've got to go to 16,000 in low light mode, but it's unpleasant. The noise reduction and in-camera sharpening have created a weird fixed pattern noise that can't be removed in post. What looks much better here is to shoot in the normal profile with sharpness and noise reduction at -2, push exposure up by a stop and a third to match that 16,000 ISO and use neat video. This is D-Log-M at 3200 ISO with sharpness and noise reduction at -2. I am substantially underexposed and there's a lot of noise. If I increase the noise reduction setting, the noise does start to subside, but the detail on my face disappears. I only shoot in D-Log-M if I'm not underexposed, because it needs light. But if the exposure is under, then I would suggest going to normal profile and only use the low light mode if you really need to. As I said, it can be usable at times, it's just that image loses that natural look. It's tempting when shooting with a 3-axis gimbal to always move the camera, but it can become repetitive to watch unless the movement is motivated. Use it for static shots, as it does static very well. I really love this little thing. It's such a well thought through camera with a terrific image. Great for so many things, and especially for my cat, which of course now includes little Archie.